Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Death with Dignity podcast. This podcast was recorded one day before the 3-year anniversary of Andrew's passing. We miss you, Andrew. You've left quite the legacy, and we're grateful that you were a part of our lives. We also have some great news to share. Medical aid in dying has the potential to pass in 2 major states, New York and Illinois. In New York, it sits on Governor Kathy Hochul's desk, and in Illinois, the decision is up to Governor J.B. Pritzker. Shout out to those whose advocacy efforts have led us to this point. This includes our very own Susie Flack and countless others such as Deborah Robertson, who the law is actually named after in Illinois. I believe it's called Deb's Law. The stakes feel high. If the bill passes in New York, then Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York City would all have medical aid in dying. So that's why today's guest, Mandi Zucker, is exactly the person we wanted to talk to. She's the executive director of End of Life Choices New York. She goes into what her organization aims to achieve with this bill. She kind of gives us an idea of which way Governor Kathy Hochul might also be leaning. And we also spent some time discussing grief and her background with supporting people during the end of life. Let's get into it. Yeah, I was actually just watching your interview on Fox 5 New York. What's interesting is that you were actually in on the title of the piece. You were featured, but Mamdani came on before you. I know.
I saw him walking out as we were walking in.
Oh, okay. Have you had any interaction with him? Because we've learned that he's actually a sponsor on the bill.
He is a sponsor on the bill, and if I had a chance to say thank you for sponsoring the bill, I would have, but he was surrounded by, a team.
Yeah, he's definitely like a mini celebrity now.
I know. He is.
And his profile has like really arisen, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was interesting because I saw that too, that like my, piece was sort of highlighted, and he had like 15 minutes and I had 3 minutes. So I'm sure that, his appearance brought more viewers than mine did.
Well, yeah, but they featured you, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was great.
You're probably like used to doing media rounds by now, huh? I was like, she probably has some good media training because I felt like you were on message and you said all the right things.
Did you? Oh, well, I've got a great PR consultant who's making sure I stay on point.
Ross, right? I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. It's cool that people still work with PR people. I feel like with the internet and just how like media works now, PR is not thought of anymore. Everyone just does it themselves.
Well, you could, but you don't get interviews on Fox 5 like that. They'd have to find me. So.
For sure. I have to ask. So, how did you fall into this role that you're in? Being on Fox 5 and being a voice for MAID in New York.
Yeah, I always say it sort of found me. I'm a social worker, and my background, my bachelor's degree is in child development. I wanted to work with kids. The thought of working in the field of death and dying did not cross my mind when I was, in school. But my very first job out of college was working in in a hospital, selling nursing homes. So basically people would come in, they would have had a stroke, and they couldn't go home. So I would help them find a nursing home. It was not my dream job. It was just my very first job. And then I thought I got my dream job. I thought I got a job in a school, which is what I wanted. And as I was leaving, like literally on my last day, somebody I knew that worked in hospice said, we have this children's bereavement program. Do you want to just stay on per diem and do some children's bereavement work? So I said, sure. I hated working in the schools. It was paperwork. I barely saw children, and I loved working in the hospice. It just changed the course of my career. I felt like we were really making a difference when we're working with people, either at the end of their lives or when they're grieving. They were so grateful for the support, and nobody wanted to be there, but they really felt like, so glad that there was people out there that wanted to support them. And I tried 3 different schools. I thought maybe it was just the school I was in. It was not. It was just not for me. And then I ended up working in the hospice for about 12 years doing bereavement and hospice work. And that's really where I found my passion.
Wow. So you actually started
Mhm.
working with kids in the field with
Yep.
with
It didn't even cross my mind that children could be affected by death or that children could die. Like, I thought that only happens to old people. I don't know, my 18-year-old brain wasn't, expanded enough to know that unfortunately we're all affected by death and dying.
well, someone in that organization must have seen something in you, to like put you with, kids that are grieving or people that have lost kids. What do you think that was?
I think I do have an ability to connect to people. Um, I like to listen to people's stories. I think of myself as an empath. And I think, when you're really talking about things like death and dying, like what could be more personal? What can make you feel more connected to another human being when you're talking about something so intimate? And that's where I think I shine. I think I feel uh, the most alive, interestingly, when we talk about the things that are really, the most difficult. And often that is death and dying.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot too. Things just become real, and I feel like they become clear in those moments, when people are grieving or they're going through something and you're speaking to them. It's almost like an honor to be around them and in their space and be a listener or be, a person that can comfort
Hmm.
them, or maybe they can um, comfort you in like a weird way, by even,
Yeah.
letting you be in their
Hmm.
space. Um, I always think of the hospice nurses that were around when Andrew took the medical aid in dying medication. They were in the room with us, and they were just kind of in the corner, and they were like crying with us too, though, and they were just so part of that moment, and everyone was like grateful that they were there. They didn't feel like strangers in a room, and
Yep.
their ability. I just thought that was like, I hate to use this word, but it was like magical, like the energy that they gave and the comfort that they gave, and that changed
Hmm.
my view of professions and hospice nurses like after that. But like anyways, go on. You started working in like hospice. I think you said 12 years.
Yep.
Like
Hmm.
after that, then how did medical aid and dying find you, or where did your life take
Sure.
you?
So I left the job in hospice because of my husband. His job took him into New York City, and we were moving. I was in New Jersey at the time, and we were moving into the city for a couple of years. So I wasn't really looking for a job for those 2 years because I knew it was going to be a short term situation, but I did want to stay sort of involved. And I don't even know if Google existed at that point, but somehow on that wide world web, I found End of Life Choices New York. The executive director at the time was David Levin, who continues to be a consultant for us. Um, and he introduced me to it. So I called him and said, do you have any volunteer work? What are you guys doing? How can I support people at the end of their lives? So he allowed me to do some public speaking, talking to basically anybody around New York that would listen to us about advocating for your end of life needs, pain management, what it means to stop eating and drinking or withdrawing medical treatment if you choose to do that. Medical aid in dying was clearly not a thing, but it was in the back of our minds. We were starting to think about it. So he introduced me to the topic, which I became a strong proponent of immediately, probably because of my work in hospice, where I saw many, many beautiful, peaceful deaths and occasional deaths that weren't. So even hospice, which I am a strong proponent for, didn't always do what we wanted it to do. And even then, sometimes people would, be waiting for their family members and they'd die 10 minutes before their person got there. And that's awful. That happened to me actually. My dad was in hospice and had a beautiful death, but I left the room for 20 minutes to call my sisters, and that's when he died. And I just wanted to hold his hand when he died so badly, and I wasn't there. I don't know if he would have chosen medical aid in dying or not, but I really wish that we could have planned it so that the people that wanted to be in the room with him could have been. So that's when I became a strong proponent, and I stayed, I volunteered for End of Life Choices New York for those 2 years. I continued to stay involved with the organization, abreast of the things that were happening. I would call on this organization when I was working for other organizations to educate our communities. And then the opportunity became available for me to become the executive director, and I jumped. Actually,
Wow.
I jumped twice. They didn't hire me the first time. I interviewed probably like 6 or 7 years ago. I didn't get the job, and then I applied again. They called me the second time and said, "Can you please apply again?" And that time they realized their first mistake is what I like to say, and then they fixed it.
It seems like you, I mean, whether you knew it consciously or not, ever since you got into bereavement, this was like your path. You know, this is what you
Yeah.
wanted to do, and I'm sure even like the decision to be like, I want to become the executive director. That's like not just a job thing. That's like a mindset and life choice thing. You know?
It is. And it's, especially right now because we are on the precipice of passing this bill, it is a tremendous responsibility, um, but also an incredible honor. I mean, I really do feel like if we can get this done for New York, we're not just doing it for New York, we're doing it for the country. First of all, because there's no residency requirement in our bill. So,
Oh,
there's a few states right now that don't have a residency requirement: Vermont, Oregon, and a couple of other states that have very liberal um, residency requirements. But New York is going to be easily the most accessible state. I mean, it is. There's 3 airports. It's a huge state. There's a ton of resources here. So we know that we will be serving people from around the country, and that is a huge, again, responsibility and honor.
so let's talk. Yeah, let's talk about like New York now. So just to give the audience some frame of like reference, New York, just the city of New York, I think, um, has a $90 million budget, or yeah, 90 billion.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I think not million. It's just like one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest cities or states too, obviously. And you're working on the bill in the state, and the bill has passed the state houses and is now on
Yep.
the governor's desk. Do you want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about what it took to get there and just talk about what's like happening in New York?
Sure. So it's not actually on the governor's desk yet. I'll talk a little bit about
Okay.
that, but it's been signed through the Assembly and the Senate, and it has taken 10 years. Actually, David Levin, the old executive director that introduced me to this organization, initiated this bill about, I don't even know if it was 10, 15, it's probably about 10 years ago, asking Amy Paulin to be the lead sponsor in the Assembly, which she agreed to do and has continued to champion it this whole time. Um, so we started back then. We knew it wasn't passing 10 years ago, but we've been working for a very long time. People have been working way longer than I have on this issue to educate our legislators, to educate the public, uh, to make sure that all of the safeguards that are necessary are in the bill. It is a very safe, clean bill. We know we've done all this research on all of the other states that have a bill like this. So we have the benefit of all of that experience and knowledge that we've put into this bill. And now it's been signed by the Senate and the Assembly. We are waiting to put it on the governor's desk. So she has basically until the end of the year to ask for bills. So once she gets the bill and it's on her desk, then she has 10 days to sign or to veto. So right now she hasn't asked for the bill yet. And we don't want to send it to her when she's not ready to look at it because, she has other priorities and things that are happening. So we don't want to send her a bill that she doesn't have time to review. So we're waiting for her, but she has to do it by December 31st.
Okay. So is that like a provision or like like a rule?
I'm just a social worker. I'm not like a politician. I don't know exactly.
Sure.
I know that song about how to make a bill turn into law, but
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I've learned so much about all of the politics of this, but I think that's generally the way that it works, is that the Assembly and the Senate pass bills, then the governor calls for bills, and then they send them to her once she calls for them. And then once she has them, she has 10 days to review, sign, or veto.
So, what information do you have about her like views on this topic and on the bill?
So she's been pretty quiet, although I don't think that that's unusual. I feel like she will make the right decision. I think she is a strong champion of choice, of women's reproductive rights. This medical aid in dying is really just an extenuation of that. And actually, I almost feel like it's the other way around. Like, medical aid in dying is even less controversial, in my opinion, than abortion, which I also am a strong supporter of. But it's literally your own body that you are contemplating hastening death for, and your own body that is already actively dying. So it seems so simple to me to allow people to make choices about their own body that is literally failing them. None of the people that are using medical aid in dying want to die. They all want to live, but they don't have that option. They want to be able to take control and use their own autonomy to make a decision about where, when, and with whom they will be with when they die, which is something that they don't want to do.
Yeah, they want to live. I feel like that's the simplest thing that you can like explain to people. They would do anything to have what you have,
Yep.
and not want to do that, or take this on. And again, me and like Andrew used to talk about that a lot, and that line has always stayed with me. That's the difference between someone who's depressed or something and wants to like end their life,
right,
compared to like medical aid in dying. I'll talk to I'll explain medical aid in dying to people, and they'll be like, oh, like suicide. I'm like, no. Let's stop right there. Let me explain what it is, and yeah, I think that last thing you said really explains it well. Yeah, I think it's really interesting how politicians don't want to talk about this. Like whether you're progressive on the center, obviously on the right, you definitely don't want to talk about this. But there is support for it. Like Newsom made the California provision permanent.
Yep.
There's Mamdani is very progressive about stuff, but no one asked him about medical aid in dying. I mean, all the debates, everything you heard, they're asking him about support for other countries, but it's like a topic that no one actually wants to talk about, but almost because everybody knows it's important, and you just want to hope, yeah, like, and I think even like pundits online. So I watch a lot of political stuff. All they know about is like Canada. I think a lot of people aren't even aware, who are in the pundit class or politicians, that it's already available in the largest state in the U.S. And if New York passes it, it'll be New York and California will both have medical aid in dying. That would be like amazing, and it just shows how actually popular this issue is. And we're currently in kind of a more right wing, government. If I can be political for a second, I think who is it? Neil Gorsuch has written a book about how he's like opposed to medical aid in dying. But even with that, I think,
and the reality is, like, even Republican supporters, like, let me say that differently. Republicans are actually supportive of this bill. It's Republican legislators that are not supportive. So we've polled every demographic, and by 2-1, every demographic, including Republicans, are supportive of this bill. It's just our Republican legislators that are not supportive of it, which is so interesting because they are supposed to be representing their constituents, but on this issue, they are not. And that's very frustrating.
Yeah, they talk about 80-20 issues. I feel like this is an 80-20 issue if you talk to somebody in person. If you go online or something like that, I'm sure there'd be like a lot of noise. But I've just every time I speak to somebody and you just have a reasonable convo with them, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I might not agree with this or that, or I might think that this could happen, but I feel like the support for this has been built over years or decades of people actually having to suffer a loss. It's a little sad to think of it this way, but the support for these bills and these like issues are built on the backs of the griefs that people have suffered. And doesn't matter when you're left, center, right. When you see an individual go through it, and you know that there could have been another way, you convince one person at a time. And I really feel like that's how it's gone. Also, in the state of Illinois, it's also on the governor's desk. So that would be pretty
Yep.
wild that in the last 3-4 years that it goes from California to New York to like Illinois. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like it's almost countrywide at that point, especially if states like Oregon and New York don't have a residency requirement.
That's true. Although I do think every state should have this just because it will be available in New York. It's still not accessible to everybody. You know, if you live in even, Massachusetts, it's a big state. So getting to New York can be really difficult and expensive. And, a lot of people can't just afford to travel across, anywhere really. Find a new residence. You have to be somewhere. You can't, within the law, even in New York, if it passes, you can't just show up in New York, get the medicine, go sit on a park bench and die. You have to have a place to be, and you have to have doctors. And it's actually really important that it's available in every state. People want to be able to die in their own homes. I spoke to a woman. Actually, I didn't speak to her. I spoke to her husband. She went to Oregon to die. She's from New York. She was actually an interior decorator. She built her home from the ground up, like literally brick by
Oh,
brick. I've seen the pictures. This gorgeous home where she painstakingly picked every picture frame, every, coaster on every single little coffee table. Like everything was so thoughtful. And she couldn't die in her own space. Like she wanted to be in that space that she loved so much. And she had to pick up. And fortunately for her, she had the funds to be able to go to Oregon and find a place to be. But that is not the case for most people. And she didn't want to do that. She was sick. She wanted to stay home and, visit with her friends and all the things that we want to do before we die. And traveling across the country to find a bed that you can die in is not high on most people's lists.
yeah. It sounds like barbaric to me once we actually start talking about the details of what an individual had to go through, like
Yeah.
how they have to change their life. I mean, Andrew went through the same thing. He couldn't go back to his home state of like Illinois and just hang out with his family and go that way. If he wanted to avail medical aid in dying, he had to stay in California. Again, he was fortunate enough where it like worked out for him, and he was in a place where his family could come stay with him. But man, that's a really awful choice. um, you
It's
know,
awful.
and I think again we are a society that really doesn't want to talk about death and even um like discuss it, but until you know somebody, and even though it happens for everybody, it just seems like this kind of stuff is not in the public consciousness. um
Yep.
Anyways, I also wanted to ask you about, so one of the things with Governor Hochul, it seems like, that may make her sway to the other side is that she describes herself as a devout Catholic, I think. And
Hmm.
one of the groups that is opposed to this in every state, it's like the same battle in every state, is the
Yep.
Catholic Church. And I'm
For
sure that
sure.
they have a lot of power in New York. I mean, her being a governor and all. What do you think about their role in all of this? And have you spoken to like the opposition like members? What do they say to you?
Yeah. So, first of all, again, sort of like I said about Republicans, Catholics support this bill, just like they support abortion. So, I wish, again, that the Catholic Church would listen to their own constituents, but I'm not Catholic, so I don't understand too much of that. But Catholics do definitely support this bill. So that's the first thing. Governor Hochul has made it clear. She actually, she said very little about this bill, but she did make one comment that when somebody asked about this bill and which way she's leaning, she said something like, I'm not going to allow my religion to play a part in politics, and I will make a decision that is right for my constituents in my state. And I so appreciated that comment. And I believe her because she's done that before with things like abortion. So I have no idea how she feels personally about abortion, but she has been a strong proponent of allowing women to make choices about their own bodies politically. And that's the right political decision. So I do hope and expect that she will come to that same conclusion regarding medical aid in dying.
Yeah, I think that the opposition is probably just talking to her about, what really tripped me out is I was watching your interview, and it's so interesting how successful medical aid in dying has been in like America. I think you were saying it's been around for decades, and we really don't have any reports of like abuse. The reports of abuse apparently come from Canada, which has passed it as well. So no one has any stories from here, but they try to use Canada as an example. And I'm not even sure how real those stories are actually are. I know their program is way more like expanded. And we go to the slippery slope fallacy. But I feel like, it's just been so successful in the US that the people that have been behind this, it's just amazing. I mean, what we're really doing right now is not letting poor people have access to this.
Absolutely. And I would say, as far as the coercion and abuse that people talk about, if there is any coercion or abuse, it's exactly the opposite. What it is people are coerced not to use medical aid in dying. So we know that of the people that get the drugs that are eligible for medical aid in dying, only about a third of them use it. And not to say that all of them are coerced not to use it, but that is more often the case than people who are coerced into using it. So they talk about coercion and abuse, but really it's the exact opposite of what they're saying, that they say people are going to be coerced into taking drugs. And it's exactly the opposite, where family members are saying, please give me one more day, don't do this today. Then they wait too long, and then they're not able to use the drugs. So there's not a push to utilize this option in a way that, this slippery slope people talk about.
Yeah, first of all, I think the comfort that people have just by having like the medicine. I mean, we can't imagine the kind of suffering and pain that people go through who have cancer or some kind of other terminal like illness that's destroying their body. I mean, literally. I get a cold sometimes, and I'm like, oh man, I don't feel like doing anything like today. And Andrew talked about this a lot, and I've talked to other people, just that comfort. But even just having the medicine, it's not like people are like, I want to take it. I have a bad day. I'm going to take it. I always talk about Andrew's stories. Like, he had the medication and he did end up using it, but I feel like he used it almost near the end of his life anyways. He was in, his condition was deteriorating. And so, everyone has a will to live. And so people like understand that. Kind of makes me, I guess it gets me a little angry. But
and the thing about Canada too is like, this is the only law that I'm aware of where people compare us to Canada, because the United States has tons of laws about lots of things, and every country and sometimes every state has different laws. And I don't know why people are comparing us to Canada, because Canada's its own place. It has nothing to do with the laws in the United States. And there's been no slippery slope. Our laws, our bill was modeled after Oregon, which was, enacted 30 years ago. Nothing's really changed. Like, people keep saying we're going to turn into Canada. Their laws are much more liberal. We haven't in 30 years made any real significant changes to these bills. And I see no indication that we will be.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any state trying to add like stuff like a candidate. It's been pretty much straightforward. You need to see somebody.
Yeah.
You have to be mentally sound, and you have to have 6 months or less to live.
Yes.
And no one has tried. Yeah, I would say even the progressives in this country have not tried to add like little provisions. Everyone's been on
No.
message because they realize how
Hmm.
important this is. Um,
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, that's the big difference between the United States and Canada is the 6 month provision. So in the United States, every single state has a 6 month provision. Canada doesn't have that. Their eligibility requirement is not about prognosis. It's about quality of life. I think it's called interminable suffering, um,
mm,
something like that. That is not the requirement that we have in the United States. In any state, I am not aware of any legislation that's been put forth to change that requirement. No one's trying to do that.
for sure. Um,
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that, and I'm surprised. I really hope that like Mamdani gets asked about this or something. Um, because I really think one of the things that can convince Hocul, or maybe she's already leaning this way, is well, she's gonna have some challengers. She's gonna have challengers from the right as well. I think she's kind of worried about her
Mm-hmm.
job, and she got booed at like a Mamdani like rally, I think, or something. So I think she understands that she needs to make decisions that are more populist, and I'm hoping that
Right.
somebody asks Mamdani about this soon. And I mean,
I
he
should
can't.
have. I should have screamed to him, and I passed him yesterday in the hallway.
The amount of suffering that's on the line is so immense that it does like blow my mind that nobody is like, hey, what about this one issue, or they didn't even try to attack him for this, like, yeah. It's what's also interesting is this is not an attack of a vector for the right even. Like I said, no one wants
Hmm.
to talk about this issue, pro or con. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, switching from the bill, one of the things I really was interested in was your work on grief. Um,
Mm.
you know, grief is such a like a powerful topic. I feel like people don't know how to like navigate it, and it seems like you've spent a lot of time talking to people of all ages after they've lost someone and they're going through this process. Could you speak to
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, again, that's how I got into this. You know, the hospice had said we have this children's bereavement program. So it was kids who had lost either a parent or a grandparent. Um, and like I said, I wanted to work with kids, but working in the schools, I didn't actually have a lot of opportunity to work with children. And working in a children's bereavement program gave me an incredible opportunity to work with children and their families, to provide them with really, I mean, I personally feel like grief is because it's so universal and yet also so personal. We all experience it, but when we're going through it, it feels like no one has possibly ever gone through something like what we're going through. And the reality is, both of those things are right because it's so personal and individual. No one has gone through the grief that you've gone through or that I've gone through, but we've all gone through it, right? So it is a very common experience, but it is so incredibly personal and connecting on that level. I have found to be so powerful and healing, not just for people that I'm supporting, but also for myself. Frequently, people don't know that about me because when I'm supporting them, I don't talk too much about my own experiences. But when I'm saying goodbye to people, I usually say something like, I hope you don't know how much you've also impacted my life. I don't tell them how, but I just tell them that they have. And I say that because I mean it. It's a very lonely experience. It just feels so lonely. And yet it shouldn't because we have all gone through it. So being in community with other people who have gone through really difficult things, and I typically am talking about death and dying, but it doesn't have to be, right? We grieve many, many things, relationships and financial losses and all sorts of things. So that experience really unites so many of us. And that has been a powerful thread throughout my career working with children and families. And it's amazing how much even kids are able to connect to those feelings, especially when they know that there are other kids, who've gone through this. I tell this story that I worked at a children's bereavement center for many years, and we would meet at like 6 o'clock or 6:15, and they would have a pizza dinner first. So all these kids and parents and they would meet in this big room and we would have pizza. And then they'd go into their sort of support groups for people their own ages or sometimes based on the relationships. But there was this, I'm sure you've seen them now, but at the time it was like new. I had never seen it. There's like these enormous Connect Fours, you know, the game
Yeah.
Connect Four, but it's like really big. You'll see them at playgrounds now. So we had one in this like pizza room, and these two little kids who had never met started playing Connect Four. So they're standing, you know, facing each other playing Connect Four. And I'm just kind of standing around and I overhear one say to the other one, "Who'd you lost?" And the kid said, "What?" He goes, "Who'd you lost?" And he says, "I lost my uncle." "Who'd you lost?" And he said, "I lost my mom." And then they were like, "Oh," and then they kept playing. And I thought that would never happen on a school playground. Like they're not going to feel comfortable enough to talk about something like that, playing kickball or even the same game on their playground, right? But they knew here, everybody was like here to talk about the person that died, and it just made it feel so safe. That was like so powerful to me. I mean, it was like a 30-second interaction, but it reminds me all the time about how important it is that we surround ourselves with people who want to talk about this. Um, I truly mean it when I say like it has like helped me to live because I talk about death and dying all the time. People think my job must be so depressing and so sad. You know, people don't, I work from home now, but when I've worked in other spaces, people were like, "Oh, I don't want to, you know, come to your office. It's going to be so sad." And, you know, it's not like that at all. It's like very life affirming. It feels so good. And it really truly makes me think about what I want to do with my own life. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day. I exercise a lot, almost every morning. And there was one day recently, I just did not want to get out of bed. Um, and I thought about this gentleman that I'd spoken to the day before with ALS, and he doesn't have the option to get out of bed. Um, and I said to myself, I have a body that is capable, that is strong, that is able to do things for me that some people don't have. And I did it. I got out of bed and I got on the treadmill for 35 minutes. Because of these kinds of conversations. I think it really truly makes me think about how fortunate I am and what I want to do to live, to really truly live.
Yeah. What? Yeah. There's some good thoughts
Mm-hmm.
there. One thing that stuck with me that you were talking about right now. I feel like when people are grieving, or it doesn't have to be just grief, but you don't always want to share everything with like everybody, or you're not comfortable. What do you think?
Sure.
What advice would you have for someone who knows a child or someone young that's going through grief, and maybe what kind of environment or yeah, what kind of conditions do you think are important for them to be able to have that space to talk, or just feel
Yeah.
comfortable?
I would say I completely agree with you. So I don't think that kids or adults should be forced to talk about anything that they don't want to, right? There are certain people, you know, I'm sure we all have people in our lives. This person's good for a coffee or to go play pickleball with, and this person's good for, you know, a good cry one day. And you know who those people are in your own lives. Kids are the same way. So we want to make sure that they feel empowered to protect themselves and, you know, to talk about what they want to in different environments. You may have heard a saying that, you know, people die twice. They die the first time when they physically die, and then they die again when people stop saying their names.
Yep.
And that has stuck with me. So I think our job as adults, especially when we're talking about kids, is to say the name, to invite them, to let them know that this is an okay place to talk about them, right? So a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard this too, where they say, like, "I don't want to bring up Andrew because I didn't want to make you sad." As if like, "Oh, I forgot all about Andrew until you said his name." Like it's a very silly concept, but I understand people wanting to protect us. But I would say to those people, we'll let you know as the griever if we need to be protected. So when people say like my dad's name, I usually feel like what a gift to hear, like to learn more stories about him. My dad died 22 years ago. So to hear things about him that I didn't hear before, or to know that people still think about him, um, that is such a gift to me. If I don't want to talk about him, I don't have to, and I could say thank you. For many years when my dad died, we would light candles on Thanksgiving, which was sort of a new tradition. So we would have a little setting of candles, and my sisters and my mom and I would all say like a little, we can call it a prayer, but like we had a little ritual around these candles. And then people would show up for Thanksgiving. And some people would just say, oh, those are pretty candles. And it gave me an opportunity, if I wanted to say, well, we lit them right before everybody got here and said a little prayer for my dad, I could say that. And it was like the opening for me. But if I didn't want to, I could say, thank you. Yeah, they're beautiful candles, right? Like I didn't have to do anything, but it gave me that opening. And I think that that's really important, to create spaces where people feel like they can talk about the person. And, medical aid in dying is an even more taboo topic than just dying.
Yeah.
So sometimes we need to be, as the person who's experienced it, we need to be the one that brings it up. So we let people know, like, it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's why I like to talk about it too, is just to spread awareness that it exists. It still baffles my mind. I've told this story before. I know doctors in the Midwest and other states that have no idea about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? It's happening in the same
There's
country that you
people in New
practice.
Jersey. There's
Wow.
50% of the people in New Jersey don't know about it. And it's a law on the books. We've done polling, not us personally, but there's been polling that has shown that in the states where medical aid in dying exists, only 50% of the people know about it.
Why do you think that is? That's something so core to everybody, really. Either they're going to face it eventually, or someone that they know is going to die. It's not like people are not dying. They're always dying.
Nope.
So what is the reason that it's not in the public consciousness more? I think about that sometimes too.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of reasons. Nobody wants to talk about it or think about it, right? And obviously we could say we're all dying, but I'm not actively dying right now.
Yeah.
So if you're not actively dying, you're probably not thinking about your death. 30-year-olds are not walking around thinking about, advanced care plans or pain management at the end of their lives, or who they want to speak for them
Yeah,
if
or
they're
their
no
will.
longer able to speak for themselves. Right. They don't think about that. And there's, I want to say there's no reason to bring it up. There is reason to bring it up, obviously, but there's not like a natural reason at that moment. It's not an imminent conversation that people need to have. So people only think about it when they have to. If you're single, and fully single, not in a relationship, not thinking about getting married, you're probably not thinking about how to plan your wedding. But once you start getting into a relationship and it's getting serious and you're thinking about getting engaged, all of a sudden you're like, things start popping up on your Instagram about venues and DJs and cakes and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not sort of in that space, in that, getting ready to die space, it's not something that sort of comes to our mind naturally. I think that's part of my job, is to bring more consciousness to the world about death and dying, because when you want to get married, you plan a lot. You spend a lot of your time, energy, and resources into what you want your wedding to look like. And we don't do that with death. And it is, one of the biggest transitions of our lives.
I want to touch. I want to ask one more question about the grief piece. Do you think that children grieve differently than like adults, or is there a different process to it? And if so, do you think you could speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that they do. They're not little adults who, sort of grieve differently. And I think there's some good things about the way that kids grieve, and then some things that are challenging. Kids have shorter attention spans than we do, which I think is a blessing when it comes to grief. So, if I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, my whole day is ruined. That doesn't typically happen with kids. They can, have a bad moment, then their favorite, TV show comes on and they're off to the races, and, good for them. So they sort of grieve in more like bursts than we do. It can hit us for longer periods of time, which I think is a blessing. but their understanding of death and dying and the, first of all, like the universality of death and also the permanence of death, they don't understand. So they grieve differently when they're 5, and then then they're 12 and they're like, oh, he's really not coming back, right? It hits them differently, and their grief sort of, I don't want to say starts over, but it's like a new phase of grief, where as adults, we pretty much understand that grief is permanent, that we're all going to die. So those things are sort of different. We don't always use the right terminology either, right? Like sometimes we'll say passed away or went to sleep or
yeah, we don't
put
want to
them
use
down,
the word dead.
Yeah. And I always say that, like, it's just a vocabulary word to kids. It's just like learning the word orange or chair, right? Like, it's just a word. We're the ones that make that word scary. They have no idea that it's scary. I remember a little boy, he was probably 5 years old. He came into my office and he's like looking around. He's like looking under the couch. I don't know what he was doing. He was just like looking around. Well, it turns out that his mom had died. Dad told him that we lost mom, and then told him we're going to go see Mandi because of mom. So he literally thought he was going to find her in my office. And that was devastating. I mean, truly devastating for him, for his father, to have to explain, like, no, she's not actually lost, right? So we need to use the right words. That mom died. That means her body stopped working. Her heart's not beating. She's not able to eat or drink or play or do all the things that, 5-year-olds do. And that she, once her body breaks, she can't come back. I remember when my dad died, my son was 2, and I explained that to him in those ways, like, Papa's body broke, and, he can't be with us anymore. And he said, well, can't we put a new battery in him? Because that's what he knew about broke, right? So when his toys would break, we'd put a new battery in, and frequently they would, the toy would work again. So I had to explain that we don't have batteries like that, and that the doctors tried to fix his body, but they couldn't. So that means that he died. So
Yeah,
that's hard.
it's funny you say that they like pass away in like Urdu, the other language that I can sort of speak. They have like a term too that they don't say the word dead. It's just like died or dead. Well, we try so hard to like avoid that. I think my niece one time was like using the word like something died. We're like, no, don't say died. It's just like, yeah, we're scared of the impact and maybe the sadness or something that it would bring on people. But usually, what we're afraid of like that is not exactly the right thing to be afraid of. Yeah, I've
I
learned
think, there's some cultural things around that too. Like, and I'm fine with different cultures and your religious beliefs. But I think it is important, especially with kids, to concretely explain what that means. And then if you want to talk about heaven or God or spirits or souls, all that's fine. But first, explain what it means to be dead. I know another woman who, she's actually a social worker, so she thought she was like doing this right, and she did do a lot of things right. Her 4-year-old, her father had died, and her daughter was 4, and she said, she went to him and explained that grandpa died, and she was crying when she told her daughter that grandpa died, and she said, tell me what kind of questions you have. And, her daughter didn't have really any questions. They cried together for a few minutes. And then, like I said, 4-year-olds' attentions are short. She found something else to do and went to play, and all was fine, for the moment. And then they're walking down the street in New York City, and her daughter says to her, is Grandpa still swimming? And she said, swimming? Why do you think Grandpa's swimming? And she said, well, you told me he dived.
Oh.
And she said, no, he didn't dive. He died. But she didn't know what died meant. So she heard dive because the word she knew. So the mom didn't explain enough about what died actually means. His body stopped working. He's not able to eat and drink and go to the potty. And sleep, and do all the things that her 4-year-old does. So she made up in her mind what that meant.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess you do. You just have to be clear with kids too. I'm sure we could do that with
Yep.
more with like adults too when they grieve. As Kendrick Lamar said, we all grieve different. Um, even grief is just one of those topics I've really been like interested in because and because you're right. It's not just about the most potent part of probably time is when someone dies. Everyone knows that kind of grief. I've seen people defer grief, but it can be like the loss of a relationship, a job,
Yeah.
even just people in your
Mm-hmm.
life that you miss. Um, yeah, I like I've yeah, but anyways, grief is a powerful topic, and I hope that people
Absolutely.
find support because I do feel like in this disconnected world that we have right now, I guess we're super connected online, but not really like in person. I think
Right.
I always think like there's probably people just at there's probably people walking and you see them and maybe they're having a bad day. They honked at you in traffic or something like that and they pissed you off. Maybe that person lost somebody or they're grieving something.
Yep.
They're having a hard time um processing their like emotions. But yeah.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to, I'm really interested in like in your story. It seems like this project that you're a part of, it's something you've been working towards your whole life. And you're seeing it
Kind
on
of.
the, or like a lot of your life, I guess. And you're seeing this bill on the governor's desk. I mean, you're working for such a
Mm-hmm.
noble cause and you're close. If this bill does pass, what's next for you?
Yeah.
What, yeah, how do you see your role like transforming?
Yeah. People keep saying, like, are you going to pass a bill and lose your job? Um, and I wish it was as easy as that. I don't want to lose my job. If anybody on my board is listening, I definitely don't want to lose my job. But actually, the work just begins. I mean, passing this bill is like the tip of the iceberg, and we've already started. So, like I said, 50% of people in some of the other states that have this bill know that it exists. We don't want that for New York. We want everybody to know that it exists, and we want them to know how to access the bill. So, really working on the implementation of this bill, that is what is super exciting to me. So, we've already started. We've partnered with the Academy of Aid and Dying Medicine. They're in California, but they're a national organization and they support clinicians who are working with patients on medical aid and dying. So, we're working right now, mostly, I would say, we're working with doctors, but we're already working to identify pharmacies that can dispense the drugs because what's the point of having a bill that you can't get the drugs for? You
Yeah,
don't have to, right? And like just this bill in New York, just like in every other state, is completely optional. So anybody that participates as a professional has the option to opt out. So pharmacies don't have to dispense this drug. So we need to educate doctors, pharmacies, nurses, social
oh
workers,
wow, yeah,
chaplains, all the people that could be part of this, what the bill is, what their role would be, what their, how they can participate if they want to. We have to educate the public about the availability of this. So we need to do massive public awareness campaigns. Show up in nursing homes, in churches, in synagogues, and senior centers, letting people know that this bill exists and how they can access it. So the work is, like I said, it is an enormous responsibility if this passes, and as well as because it's available to everybody outside of New York, we have to educate people from out of state and we also have to plan for them. So we can't, I anticipate because I've spoken to colleagues in other states that don't have residency requirements, I anticipate a slew of calls coming in from people from out of state saying, how do I access this? How can I get a doctor, a place to be, all of those kinds of things.
so
So we're already working on that.
so how can they access it? What should someone who's not in the state, what should they know about something like this? Like do you just like live there for a little bit and then just transfer your
Well, you
medical?
don't have to live here.
Yeah, I guess
So,
just have to
in
be
our bill,
here.
unless the governor, right, unless the governor changes that, it's very possible that she makes some kind of amendments to the bill. But assuming she keeps the residency requirement out, which we hope she does, yeah, there's a lot of things that we're trying to figure out. Like, you know, do we need to find a residence? Maybe we create a residence. New Mexico
Oh,
has a great system where they have basically a bed in a nursing home, so that if people call sort of our organization in New Mexico, if they call them and say, I'd like to come to New Mexico, they can help them they need a residency requirement, but it's pretty liberal in New Mexico. So create a residency at this nursing home. So they have a bed ready for them. They have doctors who are ready to, work with these patients. So we have to figure all of that out. We're like literally in the middle of doing that. We've created a bunch of committees with the academy to focus on like how are other states doing all of these things, putting our own policies and procedures in place. We're working with doctors and hospitals to figure out what kind of policies they need if they're going to allow it. You know, how to educate their doctors whether or not they want to participate, and if they do want to participate, all of the things, the drugs that you use. And I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I can't even say I pretend to be one on TV. But there's a
um,
lot involved.
yeah, the infrastructure actually now that you explain it, it sounds like there's a lot to do. Um, is
Yeah.
there going to be any difference? Because I know the medication has changed over the decades. Um, is there any like difference between the medication they might use in New York compared to like other states, or is it all going to be kind of the same cocktail? I
Again,
guess.
I'm not a doctor, so I want to be careful about that.
Yeah.
My understanding is no, that it wouldn't be different, but it's not always exactly the same either. So
Hmm.
again, not a doctor, but I pay a lot of attention to what doctors are saying about this. So I am privy to some conversations that doctors have with one another, and what I've heard is that, depending on somebody's illness or their weight or their metabolism, or the way that they ingest the medication. So you can take it orally or you can take it through a feeding tube, or, there's a whole bunch of different things. All of those things determine the dosage and perhaps the kinds of medications that people would be taking. So there's you know, it's not just, I want to take medical aid in dying pills or drugs. You go to a doctor and they give you the script for that. Doctors really have to know who their patients are and make very good clinical decisions for them.
Yeah, we're planning on having a pharmacist that's worked on this a medication
It's
before
great.
to kind of speak about that more. But
Great.
yeah,
If that pharmacist is interested in talking to any pharmacists in New York that are interested in learning, let me know.
okay, for sure. Yeah, we'll try to do some connecting. That would be like
Yeah.
that would be cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been really nice like hearing your story. I wanted to also pass it on to Strev to see if he had any questions or thoughts before we started wrapping it up.
Yeah. So Mandy, you've been working to advocate for this bill for, roughly 10 years, it seems. A long
Yeah.
time. Shows a lot of grit and, perseverance, determination. What has this process been like for you? And I guess, how do you manage the ups and downs to any setbacks? Stay motivated.
Um, yeah, I would say it's been exhilarating most of the time. Again, I think the people that care about this bill, advocates and supporters from around the state that I've met, have been inspiring, not only because many of them have really difficult stories. And, if you have stories like that, like sometimes you just feel like, I can't do more. I'm just exhausted from my experience. But so many of these people decide, sometimes in honor of that person, that they're going to stay focused and get this bill passed so someone else doesn't have to, you know, live the way that their person did. So that's incredibly inspiring. It's exhausting. It is sad and frustrating sometimes. I wrote a newsletter recently that I said something like, we are waiting, and then in parentheses, not so patiently for Governor Hochul to sign. Like, it's getting hard. It's really, we're like right there. So it is frustrating. And I think the good news is that the people that are in this work are really genuinely nice people. Like, who would do this if they weren't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't come across a lot of people that I don't like or that are difficult, because we're all working towards the same thing. So it's been actually a really inspiring and like I said, exhilarating experience. So most of the time I feel pretty energized by this work. I am also fortunate that I have, a great family, and self-care has become very important to me. And I have a lot of, pretty sound self-care techniques that I use daily to make sure that I start my day and end my day well and grounded.
Yeah, it's great to hear from people who are passionate about this subject and, willing to be open to discussing. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good question, actually, because that is true. We all have this is one of the ultimate projects, but I'm sure there were so many moments throughout your career where you're like, this climate, this environment, this country, it's just not possible here, why am I doing this or something like that? I could totally see that. But you guys, and I mean, guys and gals, and like throughout the country that like work on this, it's amazing what determination that you've shown. And all
it's very hard to give up when you look around and you see these people who had a family member die 15 years ago, and they are still working to get this bill passed. Like, it would almost be rude, like that I would say, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I mean, what a slap in the face of the people that have been working so hard. And, I care a lot about this issue, but I also do get paid. I have a job. Some of these people, like, they're just doing it because they want this. And I honor them by doing this job.
For sure. I couldn't have said that better. Whenever this podcast, is an inspiration is Susie Flack, who is like Andrew's mom, and the work that she continues to do. She was a big part in getting that bill in the state of like Illinois on the governor's desk, and she still advocates. And so does his family, and so do we all. And just to go back to that point about like motivation, we still, I mean, friends, I mean, me and Strev talk about this. We still get so much inspiration from like Andrew. I think Strev was talking about, I think he like ran like a marathon or something, or got injured, and he was talking about how he had to he thought about Andrew and the stuff that he went through, and he pushed through it. I've got some friends here that got to meet Andrew in kind of his last couple weeks of life that have really gone through some stuff, and sometimes they'll bring him up and they'll be like, yeah, I don't know how he did it. I struggle to do this or that, and these stories and the suffering that people went through wasn't in vain. It gave us all the energy to keep going, and in like a strange way, it was also a blessing for us. Andrew used to talk about that like a lot. He's like, I hope this only like happens to me. I hope whatever this is, it doesn't happen to you guys or my family. I hope no one else has to go through this, and I hope you guys can use this somehow, and but that's very cool that you do what you do.
Yeah. Well, it's very cool that you're doing that. What a legacy he is leaving for you.
For sure. It's like an honor to do this podcast. I mean, we get on here, we have our own lives. Like, podcasting is not our thing, We're not trying to like have the biggest podcast out there, or grow it, or or get like ads or something like that. We just do this just for the cause. And
well, I hope you do get all of that though, because honestly, that's how more people will know about it. Like we want people talking about it. So I hope I'll help you do whatever I can to get people
yeah,
to
for
hear
sure.
this.
It's really wild. The podcast has really taken on like a life of its own, especially in like the last 3 months. We've had so many inquiries, and before we're thinking about how we can get guests, but we've just had just people like reaching out to us once a month or
Great.
maybe a couple times a month. We'll get like an email from someone that listened to the whole podcast, like all the episodes, saying how much they appreciated Andrew and his story and the podcast. And like I'm like a normal dude. I feel, I didn't ever think I would get like an email like that. Sometimes they'll call me out too. They'll be like, yeah, and you're like, and your friend like Hosban. I'm like that. I mean, that's just an honor. Honestly, that's the only word that
Yeah.
like I can use. Strev, did you have anything else before we wrap up?
Nothing specific, just been really, to touch on what you were saying, really been special to be part of this, and just making sure that none of the work he did was in vain. It's special to see when we get those inquiries from people that are still being touched by episodes that were released years ago.
Yeah.
And it's, it is, like you said, Manny, it's pretty easy to stay motivated when you get these emails and you see these changes are still happening.
Yep.
Mandy, did you have any final thoughts or anything anything else that you want to say or like speak about?
Well, I would just encourage anybody that's listening, especially if they're in New York, to reach out to Governor Hochul and let her know how much you support this bill. And we have like a sample template letter on our website. It's endoflifechoicesny.org. People can go there, find her address, her email, her phone number, all of the things. But we need as much support as we can get to get us over the finish line here.
I've always wanted to say this, but we'll add that to the podcast description and like everything.
Sure will.
We'll add all the links.
Thank you. Excellent.
For sure. Well, thank you for your time. This was great, and we hope to stay in touch with you, and we'll stay tuned, and hopefully we'll be sending you an email congratulating you on the bill being passed next year.
I hope so. This year, it's got to be done by.
Oh yeah, it's got to be done this year. I meant this year.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for your time. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.